In the midst of a world that is always loud, where thoughts pile upon thoughts, and the mind is rarely granted complete rest, perhaps what you are truly seeking is not another answer but a pause, a space quiet enough that you do not need to understand, do not need to try, but simply to be there and to listen. Tonight, this journey does not begin with human beings, but with the universe, with a question that seems distant at first, yet touches directly the inner core of each of us. Why in a universe so vast can intelligence be so rare? You do not need to concentrate. You do not need to remember any concepts or arguments at all. Let the ideas pass by you like starlight drifting slowly across the night sky, without demand, without grasping. In this unhurried rhythm of telling, we will move through deeper layers of science and philosophy, not to uncover a final truth, but to sense something gentler, that your existence with its capacity to reflect, to doubt, and to feel may be among the most fragile and uncommon things the universe has ever brought into being. And if at some point you feel your eyelids growing heavy, that is perfectly all right. This journey is not told to make you more awake, but to make you lighter. There are nights when the mind, worn down by the excess of daytime noise, suddenly finds itself asking a question that sounds vast, distant, yet arises from somewhere very close. How many Earth-like planets exist in this universe? The question is often posed as a form of comfort, that if out there are countless worlds like the one we inhabit, then human loneliness might feel a little lighter. That if life is common, then our worries, anxieties, and uncertainties are merely a low note within a much larger cosmic composition. But perhaps from the very beginning we have been asking the wrong question. For the universe is not short of planets. It is abundant, generous to the point of near extravagance. Hundreds of billions of galaxies, each holding hundreds of billions of stars, and around many of those stars, planets circling steadily, silently in the dark. Science has shown us that Earth-like planets similar in size and position around their host stars are not nearly as rare as we once imagined. Potential copies of our home are scattered across the night sky. And from this abundance, a conclusion that seems perfectly reasonable begins to emerge. Many planets must mean much life. Yet it is here that a subtle misunderstanding quietly takes shape, like seeing countless seeds fall to the ground and hastily believing a forest will soon grow. Life does not only need a place to begin, it needs a place to remain. Between part X and part Y of this line of thought, there is a pause worth lingering in. A slow breath, because the story does not lie in the moment of origin, but in the stretch of time that follows the silent time rarely spoken of, yet decisive in every way. A planet may meet the conditions for life to spark within a few million years. But a few million years on the universe's scale is little more than a blink. Life, especially complex life, requires far more than that. It needs billions of years without being completely erased. It needs intervals of stability so prolonged they seem almost unnatural. It needs a patience the universe rarely displays. Here, the question begins to shift very gently, very slowly. No longer where life exists, but what allows life to persist long enough to become something more than itself. What allows fragile molecules not to be swept away by radiation. What allows primitive organisms not to be crushed by asteroids before they have time to adapt. What allows a world not to collapse into permanent chaos, but to maintain a rhythm steady enough for evolution to unfold. Seen this way, Earth is no longer merely a lucky planet. It resembles a rare pause amid violent fluctuations, a place where over billions of years catastrophes arrived, but not too early. Changes occurred, but not too quickly, as if everything stood perpetually close to the edge, yet never quite fell. Perhaps this is why most of life's history on Earth appears strangely slow. Billions of years passed with life existing only in its simplest forms. No thought, no consciousness, no questions, just existence, just continuation. Intelligence did not emerge as an obvious next step, but as a fragile misalignment, a very late branch on a very long road. Here we can hear the echo of an old low thought from Marcus Aurelius. Everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it is endurable, then endure it. Not as moral advice, but as a stark observation of reality. Most things that persist do so simply because they can endure time. Nothing more. Between part Y and part Z of this journey, we begin to sense something else quietly forming. If intelligence requires such immense spans of time to appear, then perhaps it is not the universe's inevitable destination. Perhaps the universe does not move toward intelligence. It merely allows it in a few rare moments to occur. And if that is so, then human existence with its capacity to ask questions, to doubt, to think through the night is no longer self-evident. It becomes a fragile phenomenon, a temporary state, a small flame burning for a very brief interval in cosmic time. Recognizing this need not lead to fear. On the contrary, it may bring a very different feeling, a strange gentleness. For if intelligence is not something the universe guarantees, then the fact that you are here listening, thinking is already rare enough that it requires no further proof. And as that thought slowly settles, we may allow ourselves to release the original question, the question of how many planets there are, and step into a deeper layer of the night. A place not of statistics, but of silence stretching across billions of years. Not of answers, but of the conditions that make a question possible at all. And if your eyelids are beginning to feel a little heavier, now that is as natural as the way life itself once moved forward very slowly over a very long time and in silence. If in the previous chapter we gently set down a large question as we stepped into the night, then here the story continues to drift not through any sudden eruption, but through time. A great deal of time. So much that the human mind scarcely knows how to feel it. 4 billion years, not 40 centuries, not 4 million years, but 4 billion quiet revolutions of a planet around its star before any being existed that could ask who it was. Between these two chapters, there is a subtle transition almost imperceptible from the question of why life can persist to a deeper, heavier one, why it is so slow. And here the answer does not arrive in words, but in an extended silence. Most of the history of life on Earth had no trees, no animals, no eyes lifted toward the sky. It was an ocean of microorganisms, a world of chemical reactions repeating themselves without awareness, without memory, without questions. If we could fast forward the film of life, then for nearly its entire duration, the screen would show only monotonous fields of color, single-celled beings appearing, persisting, and vanishing, leaving no trace within experience itself. Here lies an easy misunderstanding. We often look at the past through the eyes of the present and assume that everything that happened was necessary to arrive at us. But the truth may be far colder. Across those billions of years, there was no sign that intelligence had to appear, no arrow pointing toward consciousness, no plan laid out in advance. Life, for most of its existence, simply lived. No more, no less. Between the opening of this chapter and what follows, we may pause for a moment, as if letting the breath of the story slow to the rhythm of evolution itself. For what matters is not that intelligence arrived late, but that it almost did not arrive at all. Imagine this: if Earth had been wiped clean once more only a few 100 million years ago, then everything we call human would never have existed. No philosophy, no memory, no quiet nights like this one. Everything would return to slime, a word that sounds dismissive yet is deeply honest. Slime does not ask about meaning. It does not require purpose. It exists because it exists. And perhaps that is the universe's default state. The philosopher Emile Cioran once wrote, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." Not as a call to despair, but as a bleak observation about the slowness of awareness that consciousness always arrives long after reality, that by the time we understand most of it has already passed. In this light, human intelligence no longer appears as the obvious summit of evolution, but as a phenomenon that arrived late, very late, and perhaps not entirely necessary. Life existed stably for billions of years without thinking about itself. It multiplied, adapted, spread, and transformed without memory or ego. Between these reflections, a strange feeling may arise, not sadness and not quite pride, but a deep humility. If intelligence is not inevitable, then having it is not a birthright. It is like a thin glimmer of light appearing on the surface of water after a very long night. Perhaps that is why intelligence is always accompanied by unease. It carries anxiety, doubt, and a sense of displacement, things that slime never has to face. Consciousness is not only the ability to understand, but the ability to recognize one's own fragility. At this point, we can hear a familiar resonance from Friedrich Nietzsche when he wrote in The Gay Science Consciousness is really only a net of communication between human beings. Consciousness is not the deep essence of life, but a thin layer formed very late, easily wounded, and dependent on connection. If so, then the 4 billion years of silence before intelligence appeared were not awaiting. They were simply the universe's natural state. Intelligence was not expected. It was not invited. It merely arose by chance, like a small ripple on the surface of an otherwise still lake. From here, we may gently set down a persistent expectation humans often carry, that everything must have meaning, that evolution must lead to us, that intelligence is the destination. Perhaps not. Perhaps intelligence is only a rare detour, beautiful, fragile, but not inevitable. What it asks is a settling and acceptance that most of the universe's time passes with no one there to remember it. And precisely because of this, the present moment, where a mind is listening, is tired, is in need of rest, becomes quietly complete. If right now you feel yourself growing a little smaller within that flow, there is nothing frightening about it. It may even be a comfort. For in those 4 billion years of silence, no one needed you to understand anything. And tonight, you do not need to understand anything more. Just allow your thoughts to slow the way life itself once did for a very long time, very slowly, before it ever knew what it meant to think. Amid the long current of silence we have just passed through, there is a moment so small that if we do not look closely, we would miss it entirely. Not an explosion, not a revolution, just a quiet biological event unfolding somewhere in the ancient waters of Earth, and then almost without anyone noticing, everything changed course. This was the moment the eukaryotic cell came into being. Before that point, life existed in a very modest form, simple cells living independently, doing one thing, only persisting long enough to copy themselves. No organs, no specialization, no complex structure. They were like very short sentences repeated for billions of years, without addition, without variation. And then in a moment that modern biology is still trying to fully understand, one cell did not eat another as usual. It kept it, did not digest it, did not discard it, simply kept it and lived with it. Between the beginnings of this story and what follows, there is a pause worth lingering in a little longer. Because what happened here was not merely an evolutionary step, it was a fragile agreement between two entities that had once been strangers, a symbiosis so deep that over time no one remembered who had once been who. From that symbiosis, new structures emerged. Energy was produced more efficiently. Information became better organized. Functions began to divide. A body was no longer just a unit, but a system where each part performed its task, trusting that the others would do theirs. But what matters is this: there was no guarantee that such symbiosis had to occur. It was not an inevitable outcome of evolution. It did not repeat itself many times like other small steps. It was like a single coin toss, and had it landed the other way, the entire history of complex life would never have been written. Between these reflections, a faint unease may be felt. Not fear, but the realization that what we call natural complex bodies, brains, memory, emotion may trace back to an accident so fragile it is almost unbelievable. The biologist Lynn Margulis described evolution not only through competition but through cooperation, not always the strongest who prevail, but those who know how to live with others. And if we look more deeply, we see that complex biology was not built from clear victories, but from prolonged compromises where each side accepted giving up a measure of independence in exchange for a shared future. Here, philosophy begins to whisper softly. For if the foundation of your body is an ancient symbiosis, then you yourself are not a pure individual. You are a living memory of living together at the deepest level. Carl Jung once wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Not only true of human beings, but perhaps true of life from the very beginning. Between the middle of this chapter and what comes next, the story begins to slow. Because when we look back at that nearly impossible moment, another question gradually emerges, very gently, yet persistently. If complex biology is the result of a rare accident, then intelligence may be an accident of that accident. Not a goal, not a destination, just an unforeseen consequence. Life existed for billions of years without needing a brain. It did not require thought to adapt. It did not need consciousness to multiply. Intelligence arose not because life wanted to understand itself, but because a chain of coincidences stacked together long enough, stable enough, fortunate enough. And if so, intelligence is not the center of the story. It is an addition, beautiful, intricate, but not guaranteed to last. Here we can hear a distant resonance of Albert Camus when he wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart." Not because life comes with a preordained purpose, but because continuing to exist, continuing to transform is already something strange in itself. From here, we may allow ourselves to loosen a familiar illusion that the universe is moving toward us, that everything was arranged so intelligence would appear. Perhaps not. Perhaps the universe simply allows rare things to happen and then leaves them to contend with their own fragility. Realizing this does not make life meaningless. On the contrary, it can soften everything. If complex biology is a cosmic accident, then your existence with a body that can feel, a mind that can grow tired, and a consciousness that is listening does not need to carry the burden of having to become something grand. You are not the destination of evolution. You are a moment. And that moment, like the moment of that ancient cell, only needs to be held long enough to be felt. We can let our thoughts slow as if returning to the ancient waters where everything began. There is no ambition there, no plan. Only chance encounters fragile survivals, and a silence long enough for the impossible to have time to happen. And if now your eyelids begin to close a little, let it happen. For like complex biology, sleep does not require a grand reason. It needs only a condition quiet enough, and one nearly impossible moment arriving just in time. After the rare moment when complex biology managed to appear, the story does not immediately open into light. It enters another phase, quieter, harsher, where the question is no longer whether life can begin, but whether it is allowed to continue. From the fragile accident of symbiosis into the prolonged trial of time. Because for a simple organism to become a complex system, for cooperative cells to give rise to bodies capable of feeling. There is a condition that sounds simple at first, yet within the universe is almost unimaginable stability over billions of years. Not absolute stability, only the absence of complete destruction. And yet even this modest requirement is something most planets cannot meet. The universe is not a patient place. It is full of turbulence, full of collisions, full of events so immense that no malice is required to erase everything fragile. Asteroids wander like uncontrolled memories, occasionally striking a world that is trying to remain calm. Radiation from nearby stars floods through space, indifferent and relentless. Climates shift, atmospheres collapse, oceans evaporate or freeze solid. A planet can do everything right only to fail because of a single mistimed moment. In the human imagination, life is often seen as resilient, enduring, as something that always finds a way. But on a cosmic scale, life is more like a whisper than a loud voice. It does not fight. It does not demand. It exists only when conditions allow and disappears when those conditions are withdrawn. Most worlds do not fail for lack of potential. They fail for lack of patience. Not patience in an emotional sense, but in a physical one. Not enough quiet time for slow chains of reactions to stack upon one another. Not enough calm for evolution to do its painstaking work. Everything is interrupted too early, too often. Looking back at Earth's history, we can see that life has repeatedly stood very close to the abyss. Mass extinctions, prolonged ice ages, dramatic shifts in the atmosphere, and each time life did not advance. It merely tried not to vanish. Between these reflections, a familiar feeling may quietly surface, the sense that this sounds very much like human inner life. We do not always need more motivation to grow. Most of the time, we simply need a space calm enough not to collapse. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once wrote, "In the human condition, time is the space in which human affairs unfold." Time is not only a flow, but a space in which fragile things are given the chance to take shape. Yet the universe rarely grants worlds enough of that space. Some planets lie too close to their stars, heated until nothing can endure. Some are too distant, where every reaction freezes before it can begin. Some lose their magnetic fields, allowing radiation to gnaw away at their atmospheres until only bare rock and dust remain. There are places where life may have begun only to be extinguished before it learned how to adapt. The problem is not that the universe does not create life. The problem is that the universe does not wait. Life needs a very long time to become complex, but the universe moves according to its own rhythm, fast, powerful, indifferent. Worlds that are not lucky enough are swept away like thoughts that never quite form in a mind that is too noisy. Here, philosophy whispers again very softly, because perhaps it is not only planets that fail for lack of patience. Humans do as well. We often live within cycles that are too short, pressures that are too urgent, expectations that arrive too quickly. We want to understand, to change, to become, yet we rarely grant ourselves enough quiet time for that to happen. Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "In either-or, patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. Not every seed dies because it is flawed. Many seeds die because there is no season long enough." The violent images of asteroids and radiation fall away, leaving only a gentle realization that enduring existence, whether of a planet or a person, does not require grandeur. It requires only being left undisturbed long enough. Seen this way, Earth is not a perfect miracle. It is a world that nearly failed many times. Yet each time was not completely erased, a chain of not quite dying, stretched long enough for something rare to have a chance to appear. And if you are listening to these words tonight with a mind tired from too many daytime upheavals, perhaps you do not need to evolve into anything more right now. You only need a small pocket of stability, a steady breath, and unbroken silence. Like life on a fragile planet, sometimes healing does not come from change, but from the absence of yet another collision. If your eyelids are growing heavy, now let them close, not because you have understood everything, but because you are allowing yourself and this stream of thought enough time to exist in peace. In an impatient universe, that alone is already rare. After passing through worlds that were not patient enough, the story gently changes direction, no longer looking outward into the universe, but turning inward toward a small device that quietly decides how we understand everything, the human brain. Not loudly, not judgmentally. Just a gentle truth that can still unsettle us. Our brains were never designed to understand the universe. They were designed to survive. From the need of planets for long stretches of calm, so life can mature, to the need of humans for a long enough pause to recognize their own limits. Because if the universe lacks patience, our intuition is often far too quick. The brain evolved in a very small world, distances of a few dozen meters, spans of a few decades, speed sufficient to flee, to hunt, to recognize familiar faces and unfamiliar threats. It learned to trust what can be seen, what can be touched, what unfolds in straight lines and clear sequences, cause then effect, before then after, near then far. But the universe does not move to that rhythm. On very large scales, space curves, time stretches, distances are not fixed. On very small scales, particles are waves, and sometimes nothing at all until they are measured. Cause and effect can blur, even reverse. Intuition, the thing that once kept us alive, begins to object, even to rebel. It says this makes no sense, and science replies very softly, it is simply unfamiliar. For if we try to force intuition to grasp the universe, we only grow more tired. Science does not begin when we understand. Science begins when we accept that we may be wrong. Galileo once wrote in Il Saggiatore, philosophy is written in this grand book, the universe, which stands continually open to our gaze. But that book is not written in the language of sensation. It is written in a script intuition cannot read fluently. That is why physics often feels irrational, not because it is wrong, but because it does not cater to instinct. It asks us to trust what we cannot picture, that time slows as we move faster, that two particles can remain linked across light years, that empty space is not empty at all, that what we call the present is only a thin slice of something far larger. Not because we are foolish, but because we are using a tool sharpened for the jungle to measure the distances between stars. And when we realize this, we can breathe a little more slowly. We do not need to understand everything. We do not need to win a silent argument with the universe. Immanuel Kant once said in Critique of Pure Reason, the understanding does not draw its laws from nature, but imposes them upon nature. It is not the universe that is wrong, but the frame we use that is too narrow. The illusion of intuition does not appear only when we look at the sky. It appears within our inner lives as well. We believe we understand others. We believe we understand ourselves. We believe today's emotions speak truth about tomorrow. But like the universe, the mind does not follow simple straight lines. We interpret the world through neat stories because the brain prefers neatness. It dislikes ambiguity. It wants clear causes, quick conclusions. And when they are absent, it invents them rigid beliefs, familiar biases, explanations that sound reasonable until reality quietly dissolves them. Here, science and philosophy meet in a rare agreement. Intuition is not the enemy, but it is not the guide. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Types, the intellect is no substitute for the lack of feeling. Yet feeling too cannot replace the recognition of our limits. Confusion is not failure. It is a sign that we have stepped beyond the familiar, that when intuition is betrayed, it is not to leave us lost, but to teach us to move more slowly. Science at its deepest core is not a collection of answers. It is an attitude, a willingness to live with questions, a humility before a reality that does not conform to our wishes. And perhaps that attitude itself is what heals. Because if our brains did not evolve to understand the universe, then we do not need to force ourselves to understand everything. We need only enough gentleness to stay with what we do not yet know, enough patience not to turn uncertainty into fear, enough softness to let old models dissolve when they no longer fit. As this chapter draws to a close, the rhythm slows. There are no more strange concepts, only a quiet recognition that feeling tired from trying to understand everything is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of a brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, protecting you from overload. And tonight, you do not need to defeat your intuition. You do not need to force yourself to grasp the universe. You only need to allow it to be still like an undisturbed lake. Because sometimes what is deepest does not come from seeing more clearly, but from stopping the effort to see. If your eyelids are growing heavy now, let it happen. Not because you have understood this chapter, but because your intuition after a long day has finally been given permission to rest. And in that silence, perhaps the universe does not need you to understand it. It only needs you to be there very softly, very still. After accepting that our intuition can betray us, tonight's story quietly turns in another direction towards something that seems most familiar, yet suddenly becomes fragile time. Not as the clock on the wall, not as tomorrow's date on a calendar, but as a soft flow elastic and curve shaped by the position and velocity of whoever moves within it. We move from acknowledging the limits of intuition to touching a truth that leaves intuition entirely helpless. Time does not pass evenly for everyone everywhere. It is not a straight river running through the universe. It is a fabric able to stretch, to wrinkle, to bend under mass and motion. When we stand still on Earth, time moves at a rhythm we call normal. But move only a little into orbit, increase speed approach, something massive, and that rhythm changes. Clocks on satellites run faster than clocks on the ground. Time for astronauts passes more slowly than time for those at home. Not in imagination, not as metaphor, but in precise measurements. Here we can pause to feel a subtle shift. The sense of safety we once placed in absolute time begins to dissolve. Space and time are no longer an unchanging backdrop against which events unfold. They are part of the event itself. They participate in the story. Albert Einstein once wrote simply, yet in words that shook a century in relativity, the special and the general theory. The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Not to deny human experience, but to remind us that experience is only a thin slice within a deeper structure. When hearing this, many feel uneasy. For if time is not absolute, what secures memory promises the feeling of already and not yet, and yet here a gentle healing may appear. Because if time is not rigid, then pain is not locked forever onto a straight axis. Between these reflections, we begin to notice that the way time feels fast or slow in our inner lives is not an error. It is an honest reflection of where we are within the fabric of experience. When we are anxious, time stretches. When we are at peace, time settles. When we grieve, the past spills into the present. When we hope, the future slips into every breath. The philosopher Henri Bergson distinguished between physical time and lived time durée, the flow of time felt from within. In Time and Free Will, he wrote, "Duration is the continuous progress of the past which gnaws into the future and which swells as it advances." Lived time does not flow in separate seconds. It thickens, it carries memory, it shifts with meaning. If space and time are not absolute, then reality is not only what appears before our eyes. It is deeper, denser, wider. What we call now is merely a thin intersection among countless other slices. This does not diminish life's value. On the contrary, it can soften each moment. For if now is not a fixed point we must grip tightly, then we do not need to cling to it with tension. We can be in it and let it pass, just as we are listening now to a slow voice in the night. What has happened is not sealed away behind us like objects in a locked vault. It remains present as memory, habit, feeling. And if time is a soft structure, then the past is not a distant place beyond reach. It is a layer beneath the present, sometimes rising, sometimes settling. Martin Heidegger wrote, "In being and time, time is not a thing." Thus, nothing which is, and yet it remains constant in its passing away. Time is not an object to be grasped. It is a way in which being opens itself. Here, healing does not come from fully understanding relativity or existential philosophy. It comes from a simple feeling you do not need to run after time. You are not falling behind. You do not need to catch up with life as if it were a departing train. When we stop treating time as a straight line to be conquered, we can allow ourselves to rest, not stopping out of fear, but because we are no longer driven by the illusion that everything is slipping away. If reality is deeper than what we sense, then sleep is not a loss of time. It is another way of existing within the flow, a way that requires no measurement, no before and after, only breath and a very slow release. And if as you listen now, the feeling of now begins to dissolve, no longer clear where beginning or end lies, there is nothing to worry about. It may be a sign that you are touching a place where time's urgency no longer rules. Let time do what it has always done best, flow in its own way. and you tonight do not need to follow it. You only need to lie within it, very still, very light, until sleep arrives like a moment without position, without velocity, and without linearity. After allowing time to dissolve out of its familiar straight lines, tonight's story continues to drift very slowly toward another realization, one that is even more fragile. We are still very young. Not young in the sense of a human lifespan, but young by the measure of the universe. So young that if the history of the cosmos were a long night, humanity would have only just opened its eyes. From recognizing that time is not absolute, we move to sensing our position within that flow of time. And here the feeling is neither pride nor quite fear, but a gentle awakening we have only just begun. Most of Earth's existence passed without any civilization at all. No language, no tools, no collective memory. Only life quietly persisting, adapting, then vanishing. If the entire history of life were stretched into a single day, everything we call civilization would occupy only the final few seconds before midnight. And even within those brief seconds, human awakening came late. Hundreds of thousands of years lived as hunter-gatherers. Then, only a few thousand years ago, writing appeared. Cities formed, memory was preserved, and only in the last 500 years, a blink in history science began to completely change our place in the world. In 500 years, humanity moved from believing Earth was the center of everything to seeing itself as a speck of dust in an expanding universe. From viewing the sky as a fixed dome to measuring the ages of galaxies. From mythic stories to equations describing space-time. The change came so quickly that the human mind scarcely had time to adapt. No sooner had we learned to see farther than we were forced to confront how small we truly are. And here a very quiet question begins to surface. Are we a young civilization playing with tools that have outpaced our maturity? Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "In human, all too human maturity of man, that means to have regained the seriousness that one had as a child at play." Perhaps we are still at play, but with forces that are very real, very powerful, and very difficult to reverse. Between these reflections, imagination opens a wide space. What if not all civilizations are as young as we are? What if somewhere in a quiet corner of the universe there once existed a civilization a million years ahead of us? A million years for humans is nearly impossible to imagine, but for the universe, it is only a slightly longer blink. A civilization a million years ahead would have had time to experiment, to fail, to adjust, to learn how to live alongside its own technologies. It may have passed beyond the immature phase, the phase where power grows faster than wisdom. We begin to sense a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of time or space, but the silence of disparity. Disparity in experience and understanding, in ways of seeing the world. If they exist, they might look upon us the way we look back at ourselves a few centuries ago, with curiosity, with a measure of compassion, and perhaps with caution. For a young civilization is not only dangerous to itself, it is unpredictable. Here, philosophy whispers again softly about maturity, not technological maturity, but self-awareness. Carl Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." A young civilization often falls in love with light achievements, breakthroughs, before it has learned to look at the shadows that accompany them. Between these thoughts, an unexpected gentleness can arise. For if we are still young, then the contradictions, anxieties, and unrest of this era are not signs of failure. They are signs of a stage not yet complete, like a person growing up clumsy with their own emotions and strength. Seen this way, humanity's youth is no longer something to be ashamed of. It becomes a reminder that we do not yet need to know everything, do not yet need to control everything, do not yet need to prove ourselves as the center of the universe. The question of civilizations that came before us does not require an immediate answer. It only needs to be asked like a distant mirror, reflecting back the fragility of our present moment. If humanity has only just woken up, then what matters is not running faster, but learning how to be awake, learning not to confuse power with maturity, learning to live long enough to understand what we are doing. And if as you listen now you feel small within that sweep of history that is not meant to make you sad, it may be a comfort. For a young civilization, like a young person, still has ample space to learn to err, to soften. Tonight, you do not need to carry the future of humanity. You only need to lie still within this very young moment of the universe, where being allowed to rest, to breathe slowly, and to not know everything yet is itself a sign that maturity has begun. After recognizing ourselves as a civilization still very young, tonight's story gently touches a wider void, not the emptiness of space, but of sound. A prolonged silence so dense that at times we no longer know whether to call it peaceful or unsettling. If intelligence were common in the universe, if conscious life emerged as readily as new stars, then the night sky should not be this quiet. We should have seen traces by now repeating signals unfamiliar structures, civilizations leaving footprints on a galactic scale. Yet when we listen, truly, listen for a very long time with patience, we hear only silence. From realizing our youth, we move to facing a question without clear shape. If there is someone else out there, where are they? And if there is no one at all, what does that say about us? The paradox of silence is not merely a scientific question. It touches something deeply emotional. For humans, even when strong, still fear loneliness. We look to the sky not only to understand, but to find companionship, a confirming signal that intelligence is not just a solitary accident on a small planet. The universe's silence is not a clear refusal. It is simply no reply. And it is precisely this absence of response that unsettles us. If intelligence is common, perhaps we arrive too early among the first civilizations to open their eyes. The universe may be young in another sense. Other civilizations may not yet have had time to emerge like a city still asleep with only a single light glowing in the night. If intelligence is rare, then perhaps we are a fragile exception, a chain of coincidences so long that consciousness barely had a chance to arise. Not because the universe is stingy, but because the conditions required for intelligence to exist simultaneously are exceedingly unlikely. In that case, the silence is not emptiness, but the consequence of probability. And if we are alone, then that silence carries a very different weight. Between these reflections, a subtle feeling may appear, not quite fear, but a deeper stillness than usual. For if there is no one else, then every question of meaning, responsibility, and existence returns to us with nowhere left to pass it on. Blaise Pascal once wrote in Pensée, "The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me, not because space is infinite, but because its silence does not reflect us back to ourselves." Yet here, something is easily overlooked. Silence is not necessarily a sign of absence. It may be a sign of distance of time, of perception of modes of existence. A civilization millions of years ahead of us may no longer transmit signals in ways we can recognize. They may have moved beyond the need to speak loudly, or they may have learned the value of leaving no trace at all. What makes the paradox of silence so piercing is not that we hear no one else, but that we are listening with a mind full of expectation. We want the universe to respond the way we want a conversation not to end unfinished. But perhaps the universe was never built to comfort. It has no obligation to answer. And in that very lack of reply, humans are forced back to the oldest question of all. What will we do with this silence? Albert Camus wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Not to condemn the universe, but to describe the human condition when standing before a reality that does not speak. Instead of seeing silence as absence, we can begin to see it as open space, a space wide enough for our young intelligence to ask to shape itself and to assume responsibility. If we are early, we have time. If we are rare, we have value. If we are alone, we have responsibility. These possibilities do not exclude one another. They may overlap like layers of night deepening as you listen, and none of them require you to feel afraid right now. If the universe is silent, then tonight you do not need to say anything more either. No answers required, no full understanding demanded. Silence is not always empty. Sometimes it is the only place where the mind can rest without being questioned. Let the sky remain quiet in its own way, and allow yourself in this moment to be quiet with it. After lingering long enough with the silence of the universe, tonight's story gently shifts direction, not to seek more sound, but to change perspective. Not to look higher, but to step farther back. Far enough that Earth is no longer a familiar place, but an image. When Earth is seen from space, the first thing that disappears is not detail, but boundaries. No borders drawn in ink, no flags, no names. Only a fragile sphere suspended in darkness, wrapped in an atmosphere so thin it is almost unbelievable that it can hold all of life. From the question, "Is there anyone else out there?" we move to a quieter one. Where are we in all of this? And when the distance is great enough, the answer no longer comes through reasoning, but through feeling. Many astronauts have said that seeing Earth from orbit is unlike any other experience. Not a sense of conquest, not pride, but a gentle dissolution of the ego. Concerns that once felt enormous become difficult to hold. Conflicts that once seemed irreconcilable suddenly feel small. No spacecraft is required, no orbit. Just imagine yourself slowly pulling away from where you live. The city shrinks, nations fade, continents drift apart, and then there remains only a blue planet without lines to divide it. At that distance, boundaries vanish, not because we deny history or difference, but because they no longer appear. They exist in memory, in stories and maps, but not in the image of the planet itself. Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. When the language of power and division no longer applies, the world opens in another way." Between these reflections, something very subtle begins to form planetary awareness. Not as a doctrine, but as a fresh feeling that what we often call my problems or our problems are unfolding on the same small, fragile surface. That every conflict, no matter how fierce, is drawing energy from the same ecosystem. This awareness does not ask you to become someone else. It only invites you to look a little wider. As if instead of asking who is right, we begin to ask what is happening to this whole place. Planetary awareness does not arise from sharp argument. It comes from distance, from seeing shared fragility, from realizing that all beings on Earth share the same physical fate, the same atmosphere, the same oceans, the same rotation. Hannah Arendt wrote in The Human Condition, "Earth is the very quintessence of the human condition," not as a political statement, but as a reminder that everything humans do unfolds within the very real limits of this planet. Here, healing does not come from denying conflict, but from placing it within a wider frame. When we see Earth from outside, no problem is entirely separate. Everything touches everything else, whether we wish it or not, and it is this unavoidable interconnectedness that opens a gentler way of thinking. We sense a subtle shift in how we see ourselves, not merely as individuals facing the world, but as small parts of a larger living system, not dissolved, not erased, simply placed in proper proportion. Carl Sagan wrote in Pale Blue Dot, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us." Not to make humanity smaller, but to make responsibility clearer. The rhythm of the story slows. Planetary awareness does not need to be forced. It arrives like sleep when conditions are quiet enough, when we no longer have to defend so many boundaries within the mind, when we allow ourselves to feel our shared fragility. And if as you listen now, your personal tensions feel a little lighter, it is not because they have vanished, but because you are seeing them from a different distance, a distance where everything still matters but no longer presses so heavily. Tonight, you do not need to solve the problems of the world. You do not need to carry the planet on your shoulders. Planetary awareness does not begin with grand action. It begins with a gaze, with recognizing that you are living on a very small, very quiet blue dot, drifting in the dark, and that simply being here together is already something strange and fragile. Let that image stay with you as your eyes slowly close. A planet without borders, a shared home, and a sleep that arrives not to escape the world, but to remain within it lighter, wider, and more at ease. After seeing Earth from the outside as a fragile blue dot drifting in the dark, tonight's story continues in another direction, not to search for more hope, but to look directly at a possibility that was lost. A world that once came very close to becoming a home for life, yet quietly slipped away from itself. Venus. Today, when we think of Venus, we imagine a hellscape, temperatures hot enough to melt lead-crushing pressure acid clouds smothering the sky, a world where life, at least as we know it, cannot exist. But long before it became this way, Venus may once have been a very different planet, cooler, wetter, with shallow oceans and an atmosphere thick enough to hold gentle warmth. From planetary awareness, the sense that Earth is a shared home to a quieter realization, not every planet manages to remain so. Not because of a lack of potential, but because balance is exceedingly fragile. Perhaps Venus was once more like Earth than we imagine. Perhaps it once had stable climate cycles lasting long enough for liquid water to persist. And then, with only a small change, slightly rising temperatures, melting ice, accumulating greenhouse gases, an irreversible feedback loop began. Rising heat caused water to evaporate. Water vapor trapped more heat. Heat rose again. And eventually, the planet ran away from itself. Not through a sudden catastrophe, but through a process that was very slow, very steady, very difficult to notice until it was too late. Between the opening of this chapter and what follows, we can pause to sense a surprisingly familiar pattern. For what happened to Venus is not a distant story. It resembles what unfolds within inner life when a small imbalance goes unnoticed for too long, a mild but persistent pressure, a quiet, lingering tension, an emotion held down. And then gradually, the system pushes itself into another state, harsher, harder to return from. The philosopher Heraclitus once wrote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." Not because the river changes completely in an instant, but because change happens continuously silently without waiting for anyone to notice. Between these reflections, the story grows very gentle. It is no longer planetary science, but a deeper lesson about habitability. A livable place is not a perfect one. It is a place that maintains balance long enough, and that balance is not static. It is a continuous process of adjustment, each adjustment capable of preserving or destroying the entire system. Venus did not fail because it was flawed. It failed because it was too sensitive to change. And once it crossed an invisible threshold, there was no way back. In the language of science, this is an irreversible point. In the language of lived experience, it is the moment we realize we have gone too far from what once felt safe. Between the middle of this chapter and what comes next, we can ask a very gentle, non-judgmental question. How many worlds once had a chance but could not hold it? And how many moments in human life are the same moments that might have unfolded differently if fragility had been noticed earlier? Here, philosophy does not issue a harsh warning. It only whispers about attention. Simone Weil once wrote, "In gravity and grace, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity, not only toward other people, but toward the fragile systems we live within, from a relationship to a mind to a planet." Between these reflections, healing begins to appear in a quiet way, not through fear that everything will collapse, but through the understanding that everything can collapse and therefore deserves gentler care. Earth, when placed beside Venus, no longer feels inevitable. It is a precious temporary state, a balance in motion, not guaranteed to last forever. And for that very reason, it does not need to be burdened with perfection. It only needs to be protected from runaway feedback. The violent images of planetary hell fade away, leaving a soft awareness that any livable place, whether a planet or a soul, is more fragile than we tend to believe. And that fragility is not an accusation. It is an invitation. Tonight, you do not need to fix the world. You do not need to save another planet. The only invitation here is to notice the small signs, to notice when a system is overheating, to notice when balance needs to be gently restored. Just as Venus once had a chance, every quiet moment you have is also a chance to cool down, to breathe more slowly, to not push yourself any farther. And if your eyelids close now, let that happen. Not because you have understood all the lessons of lost planets, but because you are still within a moment that remains livable. And sometimes simply staying with that moment very lightly is already a way of holding balance in a universe where everything so easily slips away. After witnessing worlds that once had a chance and quietly lost their habitability, tonight's story continues to drift, not to narrow its scope, but to widen it so much that even our most familiar story of origins begins to feel insufficient. The Big Bang. The birth moment of the universe is often told as an absolute beginning, a great explosion, a single event, a story with a clear opening. But as science moves deeper, the narration slows, grows more cautious. From recognizing the fragility of habitable places, we begin to ask, could the context of this entire story be broader than we imagine? And if so, the rarity of intelligence takes on a very different meaning. Some physical models suggest that our universe may be only one bubble within a larger foam where other bubbles are also born, expand and develop in their own ways. In those daughter universes, physical constants could differ. Gravity might be stronger or weaker. Charges might change. Space and time could operate under rules that our imagination has only begun to touch. If the laws of physics can differ elsewhere, then what we consider necessary may be merely local. Just as Earth's climate does not represent the entire cosmos, our familiar laws may apply only within this small home. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "The world is all that is the case, yet the world we know may be only one case, one configuration among countless others." If the universe has been born many times, then the pressure for everything to be just right from the beginning eases. The delicate conditions for life need not be explained as a single miracle. They may be the result of many trials, most leading nowhere, and a rare few leading to us. Here, the question of meaning does not disappear. It simply changes shape. Instead of asking, why does this universe exist, we begin to ask, why are we in this universe? And the answer need not carry the weight of destiny. It can be very quiet because this is a place that can be lived in. If physical laws are local, then our intelligence is local as well. The way we think, question, and search for meaning is formed within a very specific context. It does not need to apply everywhere at all times. The philosopher David Hume once reminded us of the humility of knowledge when he wrote, "Reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions." Even reason itself does not stand outside the context that gave birth to it. Seen this way, the multiverse is not an idea that makes humanity smaller. It can make us gentler. For if reality is that vast, then not understanding everything is no failure. It is the natural state of a local intelligence living in a small corner of the whole. There is no need to defend a single story of origins. No need to prove that the universe was created for a clear reason. There may be no single reason for everything. There may be only particular stories, and they need not contradict one another. The Big Bang, viewed this way, does not lose its wonder. It simply becomes more modest. It is the beginning of us, not necessarily the beginning of all things, and this allows us to loosen the need to place ourselves at the center of the cosmic narrative. If the universe has been born many times, then your existence does not need to carry the meaning of all reality. You are not the answer to an absolute question. You are part of a local story rare enough, fragile enough, beautiful enough to be lived fully in itself. Tonight, you do not need to decide whether the multiverse is real. You only need to sense something very simple, that there are many ways to exist, many ways to begin, and many ways to remain. And the way you are here now, listening, breathing slowly, letting thoughts loosen, is also a very valid way. Let the Big Bang rest behind you like a chapter already read. The book does not need to be opened all at once. Sleep can arrive like a blank space between pages where the story pauses, not because it ends, but because it is quiet enough to continue another time. After expanding the story to the possibility that the universe may not have been born just once tonight, the current gently folds inward again, not to conclude, but to sink into one of the oldest, most persistent, and quietest questions of all. Why time has a direction. Why we remember the past but not the future. Why what has been broken does not reassemble itself. Why every story seems to move only one way. From the idea that the universe may have many beginnings, we turn to the fact that every beginning leaves a trace, a direction. And in physics, that direction bears a name that sounds very cold: entropy. Entropy is not chaos in an emotional sense. It is a measure of how many ways a system can arrange itself. A tidy room has very few ways to look like that. A messy room has countless ways to remain messy. And naturally, very naturally, systems tend to move from fewer possibilities to more possibilities, from order to variety, from the special to the common. At the microscopic level, the equations of physics hardly distinguish between past and future. They are symmetric. They allow reversal. But at the level of experience, where there is memory heat and fatigue, time moves in only one direction. Why? The answer, at least as far as we currently know, lies in the astonishing initial order of the universe. The universe began in an extremely special, extremely ordered, extremely unlikely state. From there, everything could only drift toward more common states. And that drift is what creates the feeling of time moving forward. Roger Penrose once wrote of this with undisguised wonder. The low entropy condition of the universe is something that seems to cry out for explanation. Not because it is complicated, but because it is so delicate. Between these reflections, we begin to see that the arrow of time is not a river already carved into the foundation of reality. It is more like a consequence, a story that emerges as order gradually dissolves. And if so, time as we experience it may not be fundamental but emergent. This may sound abstract, yet it is deeply familiar. Think of memory. Memory cannot exist without change. If everything were perfectly still, there would be no before to recall, no after to anticipate. Memory requires asymmetry. It requires entropy to increase. And so the human mind, woven from memory, naturally feels time as an arrow. If time is an emergent phenomenon, then the feeling of being stuck in the past or anxious about the future is not a malfunction. It is how a system with memory and prediction organizes itself in a world where entropy grows. The philosopher Henri Bergson spoke of lived time as an indivisible flow when he wrote, "Time is invention, or it is nothing at all." Experiential time is not measured by clocks, but by meaning. Here, healing begins very softly. For if the arrow of time is not a rigid wall, but a consequence of order slowly unraveling, then the fear of never being able to return becomes gentler. The past does not vanish. It is preserved in the structure of the present, in memory, in habit, in the way we respond. And the future is not a fixed territory already decided. It is a set of possibilities unarranged and unchosen. It is broader than the past, much like a messy room has more configurations than a tidy one. There is no need to rush along the arrow of time, no need to optimize every moment. That arrow is not a moral command. It is simply a physical description. Martin Heidegger once wrote in Being and Time is not a sequence of now points. Time is not a line of moments placed end to end. It is a way of being that opens, and when we understand time as something that may emerge, we no longer need to fight it. We can live within it like living within a piece of music, without needing to know the next note in order to feel complete. If entropy is increasing, if order is dissolving, then your search for quiet, structured, rhythmic moments like this night is not an escape. It is a natural way of creating small islands of order within a larger flow. Tonight, you do not need to understand where the arrow of time comes from. You do not need to explain why the past differs from the future. You only need to sense something very gentle, that being tired, loosening your grip, letting sleep arrive does not go against time. It moves with it. Let entropy do its work. Let order dissolve where it needs to dissolve. And let sleep come as a pause that resists no arrow at all, only drifting softly in a direction that is calm enough, slow enough, and kind enough for a mind that has passed through a long day. After following the arrow of time, after seeing the quiet asymmetry that carries everything forward, tonight's story gently touches a question that is no longer purely cosmic, but deeply human. Do we have value? Not value in the sense of success or failure, but the value of existing at all in a universe so vast it may not need us. From the fact that time flows in a direction that cannot be reversed, we arrive at a softer inquiry: what makes that direction worth continuing? And if there truly is only one civilization in the entire galaxy, or even in the whole observable universe, then that question grows heavier, yet also clearer. If there is only us, only one place where matter has learned to think, only one small point where the universe asks questions about itself. Human beings often fear that they do not matter, that they are nothing more than dust in infinite space. But if intelligence is truly rare, if it is not an inevitable outcome of evolution, then that very fragility is what gives it worth. Value in this sense does not come from size or strength. It comes from probability, from the fact that something extraordinarily unlikely has happened, and is happening right now in every thought, every memory, every quiet question. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once wrote in Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, "In the kingdom of ends, everything has either a price or a dignity. What can be replaced has a price. What cannot be replaced has dignity." If intelligence is a rare resource, then it carries not only scientific importance, but ethical weight. Not because human beings are above the universe, but because human beings are among the few places where value can be felt, weighed, and chosen. Without intelligence, there would be no notion of good or evil, right or wrong. The universe would continue to function, but there would be no one to ask what it means. From this emerges responsibility. Not the heavy responsibility of having to save the universe, but a lighter, deeper one to preserve what is rare. Like tending a small flame on a cold night, not to light the whole world, but simply to keep it from going out. If there is only one civilization in the galaxy, then its existence is not a minor detail. It is a moral event. Every action, every decision, every way we treat one another takes place against the background of that rarity. There is no other civilization to try again, no duplicate to replace what is lost. The philosopher Albert Schweitzer once spoke of an ethics that extends beyond humanity when he wrote, "Ethics is nothing other than reverence for life." When thinking life becomes rare, that reverence becomes even more necessary. And when we speak of the value of intelligence, we are not speaking only of humanity as an abstract whole. We are speaking of each particular mind, including the one listening right now. A mind that may be tired, may be doubtful, may feel unimportant. Yet the very fact that it can ask about its own value is already an expression of value. Not all value needs to be proven through achievement. Some forms of value exist simply because they can be lost, and intelligence, the capacity to feel, to reflect, and to care, is one of them. Here, philosophy does not demand blind optimism. It does not claim that humanity is the center of everything. It only suggests that if the universe contains a place where meaning can arise, then that place deserves care, not because it is perfect, but because it is fragile. You do not need to carry all of humanity on your shoulders. Value does not require you to become something grand. It does not ask you to prove that your existence is justified. It only asks that you be here as part of something rare that is quietly unfolding. Martin Buber once wrote in I and Thou All Real Living is Meeting. Value does not reside in isolation, but in the capacity for encounter with others, with the world, and with oneself. The question, do we have value, does not need a sharp answer before sleep. It only needs to be held very gently like a small flame that does not need to flare. If intelligence is a rare resource, then allowing yourself to rest, to recover, and to continue thinking on another day is not selfish. It is an act of preservation, a quiet way of keeping what is rare from being worn away. Tonight, you do not need to decide the value of all humanity. You do not need to find the ultimate meaning of existence. It is enough to know that in a universe vast enough to be silent, the presence of a mind that listens, that wonders, is already something not trivial. Let that question stay with you as sleep arrives. Not as a burden, but as a very gentle comfort that if intelligence is truly rare, then your existence, with all its fragility, already carries a value that does not need to be proven any further. After touching the question of the value of intelligence, tonight's current quietly moves into a deeper layer. Not whether we matter, but what we are doing here within this vast silence. And the answer arrives not as a grand declaration, but as a very gentle thought. Perhaps the universe is looking at itself through us. From the idea that intelligence has value because of its rarity, we move to the idea that intelligence has meaning because of its capacity to reflect not by mirrors, but by awareness, by questions, by the quiet wonder of looking up at the night sky and realizing that we are looking at something that created us. Human beings are made of ordinary matter, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, iron elements that are not rare, not special bearing. No sign that they should become thoughts, memories, or emotions. They once lay in stellar cores, drifted through cold clouds of gas, collided in nameless spaces, and then through a very long chain of chance and fragile stability, they rearranged just subtly enough to ask about their own origins. There is no clear boundary between matter and consciousness in this story. There is no moment when the universe suddenly flips a switch and says, "Now I will think." There is only the very slow accumulation of structure until a structure becomes complex enough to turn back and look at the whole. Carl Sagan once wrote, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." Not as a metaphysical claim, but as a quiet description of a strange loop matter gives rise to consciousness, and consciousness returns to contemplate matter. If human beings are only ordinary matter, then every feeling of not being special enough ceases to be an accusation. It becomes a starting point. Precisely because we were not made from anything sacred in advance, the fact that we can reflect on the entire universe becomes something miraculous in a very modest way. No supernatural hand is required. No pre-written purpose is needed. Only a structure complex enough to know that it exists. Consciousness is not a thing inside the head, but a process, something that is happening, like a wave that cannot be separated from the ocean that gives rise to it. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza wrote in Ethics, "The mind and the body are one and the same thing." There are not two separate substances, only one reality seen from two sides. Seen this way, consciousness does not place humanity outside the universe. It places humanity deeper within it, not as an observer standing apart, but as part of the very process being observed. When you think about the universe is not separate from you. It is gently folding back on itself to look at itself from another angle. You do not need to search for meaning somewhere far away. Meaning does not wait out there to be discovered. It arises in the very moment when a mind is quiet enough to recognize this connection. Not every consciousness needs to change the world. Not every thought needs to leave a mark. The mere fact that reality knows that it exists is already a rare event. The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked in Mind and Cosmos whether matter alone is sufficient to explain consciousness. But whatever the final answer may be, the present experience remains a moment in which matter is sensing itself, and that does not need justification. There are no grand ideas left to keep up with. Only a very quiet truth remains: you do not need to make the universe meaningful. You are participating in a moment in which meaning can appear. If you feel small, that does not contradict your being part of something vast. A single cell can carry the entire information of a body. A single mind can carry the image of the whole night sky. Tonight, you do not need to fully understand the relationship between consciousness and the universe. You only need to allow one very gentle thought to remain, that as you listen, as you reflect, as you feel this stillness, the universe is looking at itself softly through you. And if your eyelids now begin to close, that does not interrupt this process. Even in sleep, matter continues to exist, to move, to carry within it the possibility of waking again, to wonder once more about itself. Let sleep arrive as part of that loop, not to escape the universe, but to remain within it deeper, quieter. as a moment in which reality is allowed to rest within its own gaze. And then after moving through the deeper layers of science and philosophy, after seeing the fragility of life, the rarity of intelligence, and the strange moment in which the universe turns back to look at itself, the current begins to slow. Not because it has arrived somewhere, but because there is no longer any need to continue. Like music gently lowering its pitch, leaving no final resolving note, only a space that is quiet enough. In that space, we can set down the last question not because it has been answered, but because it no longer needs an answer. The universe has no obligation to be easy to understand. It does not need to tell its story in ways that suit human language, intuition, or the need for comfort. It promises no meaning, and it does not apologize for its silence. It simply exists. And strangely enough, that fact itself can become a comfort. If the universe has no duty to be comprehensible, then you also have no duty to understand everything. You do not need to carry every concept, every paradox, every question encountered along the way. They have already done their work opening a space wide enough for the mind to settle. Albert Einstein once said very simply, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." But perhaps something even gentler lies here, that even when it is not fully comprehensible, it is still stable enough to be listened to. Stable enough for stars to burn for billions of years. Stable enough for planets to keep their steady orbits. Stable enough for fragile life to take hold, evolve, and in a very rare moment to reflect on that very fact. There is no longer a need to connect ideas with arguments. Only presence remains, like sitting in a quiet room, with nothing to do, simply being there. Ludwig Wittgenstein ended the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus with a famous line, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." Not as a surrender, but as a form of respect, an acknowledgement that some things need not be spoken to retain their value. Here, silence is no longer an empty or frightening gap. It becomes a resting place, a space where the mind is no longer pressed to explain, categorize, or conclude, a place where not knowing is no longer a deficiency, but a natural state. You can allow yourself to let go of a very old habit, the habit of carrying everything with you, worries, responsibilities, even the vast cosmic questions that loom larger than everyday life. Tonight, you do not need to carry anything at all. You do not need to carry the Big Bang. You do not need to carry the multiverse. You do not need to carry the paradox of silence or the arrow of time. These things will remain there, operating, expanding, drifting, whether you think about them or not. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time that human beings often forget the ability to let things be what they are. Perhaps this is the moment to practice that, to let the universe continue to exist on your behalf. You do not need to guard reality. You do not need to keep the laws of physics from collapsing. You do not need to ensure that tomorrow arrives. The universe did all of that long before you appeared, and it will continue to do so while you sleep. If at any point during this journey you felt small tonight, that smallness does not need to be corrected. It can be a place to rest, a place where you do not have to be the center of any story. Carl Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order." But sometimes we do not need to find that order. We only need to trust that it is stable enough for us to let go. And so this final chapter does not close with a conclusion. It closes with a very quiet invitation, an invitation to step away from the need to understand, to know, to carry. An invitation to return to a more ancient state where existence needs no reason and sleep needs no justification. If at this moment your remaining thoughts are dissolving gently, allow that to happen. Like stars that remain suspended in the sky without needing to be seen. Like the universe continuing on without requiring a fully awake observer. Tonight, you can let the universe do its work. And you need do only one simple thing: rest. No answers required. No conclusions needed. Nothing to carry with you at all. Let the universe continue to exist in your place. And let sleep arrive not as an ending, but as a deep pause where every question is allowed to fall silent together with you. And then as this journey slows, not because it has reached a final point, but because there is nothing left that needs to be carried, you may allow all the ideas you have just heard to dissolve very gently. You do not need to hold on to the big questions. You do not need to remember scientific or philosophical concepts. You do not need to find a final meaning to take into tomorrow. The universe does not ask you to understand it. It simply continues quietly stable, patient, and wide enough for you to rest within it. Right now, you do not need to be an observer. You do not need to be a thinking mind. You only need to be a very small part supported by the familiar rhythms of reality, The turning of the planet, the breath slowing down, the silence spreading through the night. If anything remains, let it be only a very quiet feeling that you do not need to carry the world. You do not need to explain existence, and you do not need to make this moment special. Now, you can let go. Let the universe continue to exist in your place, and you only need to sleep.